What's the result? So you can separate it in 4 groups. Why not 5 or 4, 16? Exactly. It prevents large numbers of people. So what they are really trying to do is use the old political technique of divide and conquer. Because there's such large numbers down here, you don't want to have only 5 because maybe 1 and 2 will band together and there's still large numbers there. So you really want to cut this society up in very small pieces, right? So what they do by creating this system is that now everybody forgets who is pulling the strings, and then they're just fighting with each other to see who's on top of each other. Right? Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this, because this is critical in understanding the racial paradigm of Latinas and Latinos. We are still stuck in this arrangement, this colonial arrangement. Okay, so I'm going to work through this so you understand the different ways in which it impacted our sense of identity. Let's start with this. Number 1 says Spaniard and Indian became mestizo. Where is the pure-blooded white Christian Spaniard? He's not there. Now here's the reason why he's not there, because for each of these categories, there's a certain number of rights and responsibilities. Right? So what they say, for example, if you belong to category number 5, they will say you can only live in certain parts of town, you can only marry certain kind of people, you can only hold certain occupations, you can only wear certain type of clothing. Right? So it's very intrusive and restrictive. So if you are in control, if you're creating categories, why would you create a category for yourself? Because then you're going to have to create some restrictions to it. Right? So obviously you leave yourself out of it. Right? But here's what happened. And I don't think this is something that they planned, but it happened anyway. The understanding then is that whiteness is on top, but invisible, not talked about. And that's key, one of the key pieces in understanding how we understand race in Latin America. We don't talk about whiteness. We don't. But whiteness, everybody understands to be on top. But again, it's invisible. It's not talked about. Now, let's look at some of these categories. Let's look at number 4. Spanish woman and Negro became mulatto. Does anyone know where the term comes from? The term mulatto. No? It comes from the term mule. In the 18th century, it was the only meaning it had. It's not the way we understand it today. So immediately, as you move on down this legal caste system, number 4 becomes an animal of the worst breed. Number 5, Morisco, is a black horse. Number 8, Lobo, is a wolf. Number 12, Marcino, is a pig. And number 13, Coyote. So you can see now, this mindset is so deeply embedded that these are not human beings, and now when they create a legal classification for people, they actually put categories of animals for some of these mixtures of people. One other thing is that if you look at these terms, mestizo, castizo, mulato, morisco, and all the other ones, none of those terms are racial terms, right? And by that I mean they are not the 4 categories that were made up in 1738, white, indigenous, Asian, or black, or any of the other maybe pejorative terms that we use to talk about those groups of people. Right? So they're not racial terms, but they are racialized terms. And the distinction is that they are racialized terms because they are terms created through a racist mindset. Because that's the only way you can explain how you would classify somebody as an animal and then put that on a legal classification. Right? So here's what happens. By not using overtly racial terms, you're actually creating a mindset that is then unable to have the language to talk about race. Everything is done around race, but you're not overtly talking about race. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Maybe? A little shake of the head would be helpful, just so I understand that he's landing. Okay. So, there are racialized terms. It's one of the ways in which our language has been curtailed from the ability to really be clear around race. Now, this is a hierarchy, right? So there's some expectation of movement, and hopefully the movement that people are searching for is going up, not going down. There are two main ways in which people were able to move up the ladder. One was the old-fashioned way. If you were able to get enough money, you might go to an official and bribe the official and say, look, I'm category number 5, can you move me to number 3? And then they would do that. Right? But there's another way in which people were able to move up the ladder. And I wonder if anybody ventures a guess as to what that would be. How people would move up the ladder. What? Pay. I already offered that. That's a bribe. We went through that. Marriage. Okay, what kind of marriage? The Spanish woman doesn't need to move up. She's good.
She's on board. I'm just using
yeah. I'm trying to be very concrete here, yes.
They became Christians or Catholic?
No, they were forced to become Christians anyway. What they would do is they would line indigenous people up, put some Spanish clothes on them, and then we'll have a priest come over and holy water on them, and then they become Christians from that moment on. Very interesting. Some magic dust they put on. Anyway. No, marriage, but not just any kind of marriage. It was marrying white people, white Spaniards. Right? Now, that idea that you can improve your station in this hierarchy by marrying into whiteness is what gave rise to the phrase that we continue to use in Latin America today. If you go to Latin America, you will hear this phrase today. The phrase goes like this in Latin American Spanish. It's mejorando la raza. Improving the race. Now notice that is not a very explanatory term, phrase, right? So those of you that are coming from the outside might wonder, okay, so what race needs to be improved? Why? How? None of that is being said in that phrase, but everybody in Latin America knows exactly what that means. It means improving the race by marrying someone white. But notice once again how in our language now, we don't talk about whiteness. We leave that out. Everybody understands it. Right? It's tacit understanding. But we don't mention it. We don't talk about it. And I'm saying all this because that's a powerful way of, again, sort of, controlling the way we talk about these issues. And by making it not overtly racial, just simply improving the race. Code language. We know what that means, but we don't say it. Last thing a couple of other things. I want to contrast this arrangement with the racial paradigm in the United States, which is mainly a binary paradigm, right? You're either white or you're a person of color. In Latin America, we have 16 different places where we can go, right? So here, you want to put me in one or two, and none of those terms mean anything to us, because we don't talk that way. Right? So think about it. If you bring a group of people and say, let's have a conversation about race. You bring some Latinos in the room, right? And we bring this into the room. What do you think is going to happen? A lot of confusion is going to happen. Right? We're not talking about the same thing. Right? We're also not calling this race. Right? We're simply thinking of a hierarchy. We don't use some of this terminology today. Good thing. I don't know that it would be nice today to call somebody lobo, or coyote, or vecino, but we still talk about each other in a hierarchical manner. And we use terms like this now. We'll use terms like, so-and-so is indio medio oscuro, Indian a little darker, indio medio claro, Indian a little lighter. So we continue to classify ourselves in a hierarchical manner. We haven't moved away from this. The language has changed, but we're still using the same mindset of hierarchy around phenotype, all kinds of body, shapes, and all kinds of characteristics that we use to find the right location for people in a hierarchical setting. So this is key again in understanding the racial paradigm again. But remember that we don't talk about race. None of these terms, none of this says anything about race. Right? But notice how everything that we're doing, if we're controlled by this, is doing work around race. particularly this idea of improving your race